But before we get to that, there are some headlines to take care of. The biggest one probably, AP poll. Hey, it dropped, right? No more coaches polls, media. Now we can make fun of ourselves. Right? Now we get to make fun of our colleagues, which is I'm always okay with that too. I think we take ourselves way too seriously. So let's rip some media people. I don't know. The big headline, quote unquote headline, I don't know, Texas unranked. I don't think that's that big of a headline, but after last week, people thought it probably would be. People think this is a headline because they were ranked last week in the coaches poll.
That's and received a one first place vote.
They did, yes, they did get one first place vote.
I wonder if that's ever happened. Like a team who receives a first place vote
isn't ranked in
the other poll. You know, like it's still whoever that coach is needs to come. Needs to come out.
That. I was about to say it was like the.
I hope it's Lane Kiffin.
It was like the when LeBron.
It was Lane Kiffin. He likes to stir up drama.
It was like when LeBron missed out on unanimous MVP by one vote because somebody gave it to like Carmelo or something like that. So like I want to know.
It's like Jimbo.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Probably. Texas would have, if they would extend the rankings to receiving votes, they'd technically be 27th, right? Tennessee, just behind Tennessee, who received 180 votes. Anyway, the Texas teams that are ranked: 6th, Texas A&M; 10th, Baylor; and where's the other one I'm looking at?
Houston,
24th.
24.
Yeah, Houston at 24. Mm-hmm. So, Mike Craven. Anything surprising? Was A&M a little too high? I see some people thinking 6 was a little too high. Baylor 10, is that right? You know, what are your thoughts?
I liked the Baylor slotting. Mm-hmm. Like I think that's where we have them in the magazine, around 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. It's been a while since I put that in, but I think that's fair for Baylor. You know, technically they're adjusting to a new quarterback. Blake Shapen played enough last year to he feels like a returner, but they lost their running backs, their wide receivers, some really good players on defense. So you know, right at the top 10, hovering outside the top 10, I think is fair for Baylor. Yeah. Texas A&M at 6 screams to me that we just have no idea who 4 through 15 is. Sure. Right? You could jumble up 4 through 15, put them in a pot, mix it up, pull out balls like a lottery, and you're probably not all that wrong. You know, like we have no idea. Once you get past Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, you know, who really knows? I find it hard to rank a team in the top 10 that's coming off 4 conference losses in a season that they beat Alabama, in an offseason where a quarterback has not emerged, and we're assuming that Haynes King, who's played 2 football games or 1.5 football games, and Max Johnson, who was okay at LSU, you know, not a superstar or anything like that, is going to be the guy. That's hard. That's a hard place for me to put them. I think in the magazine we have them at like 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that range. I think that's fair. Now, at the end of the year, they figure out the quarterback position. Texas A&M is a top 6 team in the country. I'm not surprised at all. Just going into the year with all of those question marks, this feels like a projection more than a reality.
Yeah. I think what this says to me is, just looking at the whole poll in general, I still think we're very much in the era of, 4 teams are going to win the title. You know, like you look at Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, and if you want to throw, we're expecting Clemson to bounce back, right? I do think it looks like DJ Uiagalelei is probably going to start the year. I think we may, if his form continues from last year, we'll see Cade Klubnik pretty quickly. But I think that even when you consider A&M and Baylor and, Oklahoma at 9, if you want to throw in a regional rival, I think very much this is still like, we know the 4, right? Yeah. Outside of that, 6 through 10, you can kind of mix them up, right? Obviously,
doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Maybe Notre Dame sneaks in there or something like that.
But like I feel like a lot of that's like hype from Freeman and recruiting doing really well, because a lot of these are like,
we hate Brian Kelly, so he's gone. So
right,
it's
I was about to say based on last year, like you mentioned, what reason is there to put right now, at least what we know about A&M? What reason is there to put them there? But also, what reason is there to put Notre Dame above A&M, based off what we know about the teams right now? I don't know. I probably feel more confident, and I'm biased. I'm a Notre Dame. I grew up a Notre Dame fan, so like
the schedule's easier.
Sure,
so like that's where I put Notre Dame in there. Like until A&M proves that it can handle the week in, week out grind of the SEC, I have a hard time imagining that they can win all those games. They've proven they'll lose to Ole Miss, they'll lose to Mississippi State, they'll lose to LSU, even when they're better than those teams. Now they can also beat Alabama, right? So like they're plenty talented enough. But that week in, week out, I just think they're a year or two away in the trenches still from handling that. Like, I know that defensive line class that they're brought in is studs. Like, Walter Nolan, those guys, awesome. They're still 18 years old, and that's a beating week in, week out. And so until they prove that they can do that, until the quarterback situation is fixed, it's hard for me to consider them a top 10 team. But I realize that there's not this great case for 10 other teams. You know, it's like, who do you replace him with? Well, I don't, you know, and so I think Houston's too low.
I was about to say,
that's my big takeaway.
Are people being too cautious based off what we saw last year and what we expect from them this year, what they return? Like Houston, I get it, Cincinnati won the conference, right? But Cincinnati lost so much, right? Desmond Ridder, Sauce Gardner, gone, right? What justification outside of last year in terms of what they bring back is Cincinnati better than Houston right now?
Yeah, I think once we get past the Power Five, these voters don't know a ton.
Fair.
Yeah.
You know, like I just don't think national media, and if you look at who votes for the AP, you know, none of those teams are covering G5. None of those guys are covering G5 programs.
Right.
You know, those are all major,
yeah.
you know, national writers or, you know, on beats of Power 5 teams. Like there's not a lot of people who are really watching Houston on a weekly basis or SMU on a weekly basis or even Cincinnati on a weekly basis. But for me, on paper, Houston's the best G5 in the country. There's not 23 Power 5 schools better than them. That's just my opinion.
Yep. All right, so that was the AP poll. Again, that'll be a debating topic as the season rolls on. Let's roll down to Austin because we cannot apparently stop having news down there. This one's a little bit more unfortunate. 2 key guys out for the year for Texas. Junior Angelau and Isaiah Nair, 2 presumed starters heading into the year. Of course, Junior Angelau on the offensive line. Isaiah Nair probably looking to be that number 2 next to Xavier Worthy from Wyoming. Out for the year after their football scrimmage, or during the football scrimmage they were hurt in. And when you throw in the fact that I'm trying to remember his name, Ajay Hall has been recently suspended, so he's been missing camp, right? Obviously, I think it looks like it was for a misdemeanor, right? It was a team culture thing, so like you assume he'll be back in eventually.
Yeah.
But
Those parking police in Austin are serious, man. Like, they've been serious for 20-something years. I bet if we asked my dad and my grandfather, they've been serious for 50, 60 years.
Okay, so
if we all haven't taken a boot off of a car that was placed on it,
I was about to say. So
I don't know what you were doing in college.
So if you haven't figured out, Ajay Hall was charged with a Class B misdemeanor. Let me see. Criminal mischief equal to or greater than $100, but less than $750, whatever these technicalities. His arrest was the result of illegally removing a parking boot from his vehicle. I'm sorry. Come on. Really?
Spencer Hall on Twitter was like, that's how I learned how to weld.
That's a fantastic
If
response
you
to
have
that.
not had a spat with parking services at university, you didn't go to college.
You didn't go to college.
You didn't go to college.
It's part
Straight
of
up.
the experience.
Now, to be fair to Steve Sarkisian, he says this is like on top of other things that have been. So like it's
Hall's had a history dating back to Alabama.
Right.
Like,
so like
that was one of the concerns.
He didn't. Yeah, but he didn't get suspended for removing a parking boot, but it's a lot more funny to say.
It's just funny that like in the NIL era, your running back's driving a Ferrari and you're still dealing with parking boots and stuff like that. Like, come on, what are we doing here?
Right.
But these injuries are important.
Yes.
Like I think Nair's injury especially is important because all of a sudden now every wide receiver gets moved up a spot.
Sure.
Right? Like Jordan Whittington as your number 3 slot receiver sounds tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's kind of your number 2 guy again,
back to last year.
and he hasn't proven the ability to stay healthy. So how do you like count on that, right? Is this just going to be Xavier Worthy and everyone else again? Because that's what it ended up being the second half of the season once Whittington got hurt. That passing offense looked loaded with Hall and Nair, Whittington, Worthy. Their tight ends are getting better with Jatavion Sanders and Jaleel Billingsley coming in from Alabama as well. So Quinn Ewers at quarterback. That's all starting to look like this big-time passing offense. Yep. It's amazing how just missing that one guy can throw that all off because now you can really double-team Worthy. Can Whittington stay healthy? Who emerges as that 3rd, 4th, 5th guy? If Hall doesn't come back, can you count on him? Obviously, there's multiple situations going on behind the scenes there. And so all of a sudden now you look at that, you know, like you just said, like you look at that receiver room, it's like, wow, this looks like a lot like 2021-ish to me, and they needed to move on from that. Angulau is a big loss, right? I mean, he's a second-team All-State, you know, guy in our magazine, probably their most consistent offensive lineman. Talent-wise, I think they have the bodies to replace him up there, but they're young, and they're going to have to grow up really fast, and that Alabama game's looking scarier and scarier.
I was about to say, that's going to be where they get punched in the mouth, right? That was always going to be the game for them, but now it's looking like, okay, now we're starting to sweat a little bit more and more. So, yeah, I don't know. When the Nair news dropped, I completely forgot about the Ajay suspension. And again, I don't think he'll be back probably by week 2 or whatever. Sark spoke on it, I believe, after practice on the 15th, Monday. And he's mentioned how their plan is to bring him back eventually, right? Their plan is to work with him to make sure that he has all the things in place to be able to bring him back. But he's still missing camp, right? And so, like, he's probably going to start at number 4, 3 in the depth chart. And like you mentioned, Jordan Whittington's all of a sudden your number 2.
And if he's already missing time in camp, what leads us to believe he's not going to miss more time later?
Sure.
You know, like,
is this something we have to worry about again?
Right. Like, if it's already a multi-issue situation where you're missing camp and all this kind of stuff, even if you do come back week 3, how am I supposed to assume you're going to be there week 8?
Sure.
Something else is going to pop up based on history, right? And so, Texas has issues going into the season. We knew that, and these 2 injuries just really kind of elevate those, amplify those a little bit more.
Yeah. One last piece of injury news that is also unfortunate. UTEP, unfortunately, I'm also sporting UTEP polo right now. Did not plan that. Breon Hayward, presumed starting linebacker for UTEP, out or sitting out for eligibility concerns. They're trying to. So Craven, you said they're trying to get him extra eligibility.
So they think he gets an extra year. You know, that 2020 redshirt stuff, medical stuff. They're trying to get him an extra year. They were hoping that it would be resolved by now. At this point, it isn't resolved, so he's not practicing with the team. He's still at UTEP. He's still, part of the team, but he's not going to practice with them.
Right.
Basically, at this point, Dimmel's just been like, I'm not going to talk about it until it gets cleared up, so we're kind of in the dark there. It's a big loss for UTEP, though. Like, we joked a couple weeks ago when we did that.
Leading tackler last year?
Yeah, he was leading tackle. He had like the second most tackles in the state behind Katie Davis. Yeah. And so, like, he's a legit linebacker. And that front 4 is so good that those linebackers just run free. And with him and Tyrese Knight, that was a great combo at linebacker. Made them one of the better front 7s, I think, in Conference USA. Now that's a big hole behind that defensive line. Who matches that production? Who comes up with that production? North Texas is a running football team.
Yep.
Like, this is not the Mason Fine North Texas team anymore. This is a pound you in the face, run the football program now. Not having your star middle linebacker has to play a part.
Yeah. So UTEP's vaunted front 7, which is still the best unit of their team, it's going to be missing a pretty key piece heading into week 0.